of these here in Madison. And then we pair this course with climate change education and carbon footprint education. So then the hypothesis is that over the course of 1 year following these participants, these people will exhibit more climate-friendly consumption as they become more aware of themselves and their actions. And I'd be happy to answer questions after about the program. So we all know that the typical U.S. household has a pretty hefty carbon footprint. The biggest contributors are transportation and those related to housing and food. So if we tackle those areas directly, there's potential for a drastic decrease in carbon footprint. So the Mindful Climate Action Study will examine changing consumption behaviors and measures the effects of mindfulness by tracking the following. We're looking at utilities, so household consumption of gas, electricity, and water, looking at fossil fuel transport, so the miles that people are driving, flying, or training, active transport, so bicycling and walking versus driving, and then dietary consumption using validated food and drink intake logs, and then looking at general mental and physical health using other validated surveys that look at happiness. So we can think about how we can mindfully shift our habits. For instance, we all know that setting your thermostat back just 3 degrees could save you a lot of money. So looking at encouraging people to wear layers in the winter rather than turning their heat up, and then tracking their utility use. And then also, again, looking at people's diet. We all know that the carbon footprint of red meat is higher than vegetables. So having people eating lower on the food chain as a way to decrease their carbon footprint. And then we can also take a look at the pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent per passenger mile for most modes of transport. As you can see here, the SUV solo driver is a lot higher than walking or biking. We all know that 40% of all trips in the U.S. are 2 miles or less, which are arguably walkable or bikeable. So we can try to encourage people to shift their transportation modes and habits. One app that we will be using, which I actually use on my phone, and this is one of my logs, is called the Moves smartphone app. And it's an accelerometer and GPS-based device that runs in the background on your phone, and it's completely free, and it tracks your running, walking, cycling, and transport behavior. So you can see that here's a typical day. I'm at the Global Health Institute. I biked there, I walked, took a bus, went over to the hospital to a meeting, and then I walked and bused back. So it's pretty cool how it tracks a person's transportation behaviors. So when I was talking about Benori's, I was really talking about this buzzword that we use in my field called co-benefits. So a single activity or policy generating multiple benefits. And the Mindful Climate Action Project is a great example of co-benefits. By trying to mitigate climate change, we're also benefiting from improving human health and happiness. And we already know that there has been quantification of co-benefits from increasing active transportation. Here's an example of some research that I've conducted here at UW-Madison, where people are biking and walking more in the upper Midwest, and using sophisticated models, we could identify that if people bike or walk about 5 miles, trips that are 5 miles or less round trip, we can improve air quality, we can improve physical fitness, we can also decrease CO2 emissions. And in this study, we looked at the 4 warmest months of the year in the 11 largest cities in the upper Midwest, and we found a potential savings of about $8 billion from reducing healthcare costs and mortality and preventing about 1,300 deaths. So the evidence of supporting this co-benefits idea is out there. So regardless of what side of the climate debate we fall on, there are a lot of other reasons than the sky is falling to respond to climate change. And it's all of these co-benefits that can make the world a better place. And mindfulness and meditation has a great potential to get us there. So thanks for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I'm Ingo. Thanks for being here. I'm going to give a book review, which is a little bit of a departure from the other presentations. But there's a book that I read last December called The Organized Mind by Daniel, I assume he pronounces it Levitin, that overall I'd give a B+ to. but there are some nuggets in here that were absolutely A-plus material. It was so captivating. It was a book that I had from the library. I actually got it as a Christmas present, too, so that I'd have a hard copy and I wouldn't have to give it back and not have a copy of it anymore. So I wanted to share some of the things related to this book that I thought related back to behavior change and the things that we care about. So along the lines of what Amazon does, you may enjoy this book if you have read and liked Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, or The Signal and the Noise by Nate Silver. Have any of you read either of those books? Okay, 3 of you. Those are really excellent pieces as well. They give you insight on human behavior and kind of what makes us us, and I always relate that back to the things that we try to do in behavior change as well. What the organized mind does really is address the issue of information overload. So compared to what life was like thousands and even hundreds of years ago, you could even argue decades, things have gotten a lot more complicated. We have a lot more information thrown our way. We own more. We're constantly bombarded with information, thoughts, messages, and that's only getting worse. Worse if you think more is bad. So what this book does, on the face of it, is give you some kind of self-help tools on how to stay organized. But the way that Daniel Levitin goes about this, being a neuroscientist, is he explains the connection back to the way the brain works and why we process things the way that we do. And that's where things got really interesting for me. So there are, like I said, the self-help suggestions, practical tips on how to stay organized in various dimensions of life. But there's a lot of discussion that goes back to what's happening in the brain in terms of memory, in terms of attention, and also evolutionary explanations for why we're wired the way that we are. And those were the fascinating parts. I'll give you one nugget that I really latched onto, and that is early in the book he describes some of the neural activity that's related to our attentions and our decision making. And he brought up the fact, which I guess shouldn't be surprising, that making decisions and paying attention to things uses energy, glucose and oxygen. That neural activity uses up the energy that we have, and we have almost a limited number of ability or amount of ability to make decisions during the day. And when we use that up, we're drained and we have less ability to proceed. The same is true of bandwidth. We can only process so much at once, and it takes energy to go through that. So the brain tries to economize, and that's why we use some of the heuristics that we do. That's why we use the default choice. And that relates back very directly to some of the behavior change techniques that we sometimes talk about and think about, like the concept of choice overload, like nudging, like choice architecture, that if we make the default choice be the thing that we want people to do and we give them the option of opting out, chances are that they won't, simply because they can only pay attention to so much. And there's an intentional filter in our brain that decides what we're going to pay attention to, and we let the default run its course on everything else. And those were some of the eye-openers to me here, being able to take what we talk about in behavior change and relating it back to what's actually happening. It just makes all the pieces come together, which is why I put the puzzle pieces up there on the slide. So what else? One other interesting concept I'll share out of the book is this notion that we have 2 states of brain activity that operate in different parts of the brain. There's what he describes as almost being in a daydreaming state and being in a very focused state. We can be in one or the other at any given time, but not both. And they're both essential. The focused state lets us get things done and filter out things and stay with tunnel vision on the task at hand, and that's important for efficiency and for productivity. But the daydream state is where creativity comes in. That's where we're able to let ideas float and let thoughts enter our brain that may seem unrelated to something, but that's where some of our ideas and creative solutions come from. So we need to be able to engage in both of these states, and I found that a fascinating concept as well. Here, just so you can see how the book is organized is the table of contents. And that's all I have. Thanks. Right. So that's a bit of a buzzword. There's also a book by the name Nudge. I can try, but is there somebody here who's really feels like? Okay. So to me, the term nudge means simply prompting people. But there's actually a book called Nudge that goes into some of the concepts of the default choice, and they've done experiments that if, for example, you make when you have employees start a new job, if you make signing up for the 401k be the thing that automatically happens and they have to opt out, you get much higher rates of people signing up or contributing to their 401k versus if they have to take the action of signing up, you get much lower rates. Something similar in Europe, where I come from. Germany and Austria have very different ways, or at least in the past had very different ways of dealing with organ donors. And the country that makes it a default has extremely high sign-up rates, and the country that does not has very low sign-up rates. It's just setting one of the concepts in the book is setting the choice architecture. So all those things connect back together.
So I'm Kathy Kuntz from Cool Choices. Most of you know us. We implement engagement games, and I'm going to very briefly today tell you about an opportunity all of you have to play a game, because we haven't really had an opportunity for all of you to play a game. And this ties to the city of Madison. So about a year and a half ago, Georgetown University announced that they were going to do a prize competition for middle-sized cities across the U.S. You know, there's been a lot of terrific energy efficiency activities in really big cities like Chicago and Seattle, and Georgetown was saying, you know, we need to get something happening in the middle cities, so they announced this competition where cities could be eligible for a $5 million prize if they reduce their consumption. And the city of Madison is now a finalist in this competition as of January. Now, there hasn't been very much talk about this yet, so it's probably news to many of you that we are a finalist. These are the approximately 50 cities that are competing for the Georgetown Energy Prize. And the way the prize works is it's a 2-year competition, and they're going to measure residential, municipal, including school facility, which is like not the way we mostly think about municipal in our universe, electric and gas consumption across those 2 years compared to 2 previous years as a baseline to see which communities accomplish the most savings. And then because it's Georgetown, there's sort of some rough thing in there about, you know, it's also going to matter who's the most innovative, and the criteria isn't straight up math, it's a lot of math, but then it's other mystery things. And a city will win $5 million. So we're talking about city facilities, schools, and single and multifamily buildings. We're not talking about businesses, and we're not talking about state facilities, which is a significant piece of Madison. The team that's working on this, the lead is Elevate Energy. Some of you might know them by their previous name, the Center for Neighborhood Technology. They're out of Chicago. They've done a lot of work in single-family and multifamily retrofits. The Center on Wisconsin Strategy, COWS, who's really a policy tank and has a lot of ties to Madison civic government kind of thing. And then the Brendel Group, which is a group out of Colorado that does a lot of municipal and school facility upgrades. That was the initial team, and the team has expanded now to include Project Home, whose expertise is low-income energy efficiency. They'll be sort of integrating this with Focus, and us, Cool Choices. And what we're going to be doing is running a couple of games. We're going to launch a game with city employees very shortly, and after that, we're going to do a community-wide game. So we're going to do a game where anyone in the city can form a team. We're going to be encouraging businesses to form teams. We're going to be encouraging schools and neighborhood associations. There will be this massive community-wide game in the fall where people can win fantastic local prizes. New on our staff at Cool Choices is Danica, and Danica's having these like brilliant ideas about prizes. There are days when she says things that I'm like, okay, I might need to like resign and play because I want to win that kind of thing. And obviously it's a chance to pummel the competition, you know, so there's that. And of course, we believe that when everybody plays, we can implement behavior change and start to shift practices in a way that facilitate. So out of that fall game, we're hoping to accelerate some deeper things that happen into 2016 that help Madison win the competition. So this is your chance. This is a real photo from one of our past games. This is how much fun players have playing Cool Choices, even very young players. Clearly, you can't win if you don't play, so you know I'm going to expect lots of Bexters to be forming teams and helping us make that happen. And there you have it. Questions? So still kind of in the works. We're going to do a lot of outreach to businesses. So the way we typically play is through businesses. So this is an opportunity for Madison businesses to have their employees play and do Cool Choices things without paying us for that. So there's sort of a great opportunity for them to form teams. And then we'll also be reaching out, and some of this will happen in conjunction with council members to neighborhood groups and some of those folks to try to get more engagement there. We'll also leverage off, the reason we're doing the City of Madison employee game first is to create a local story that we can tease on over the summer to get people to start raising their hands. And really, when we're inside companies, a lot of this is pretty guerrilla. If Terry hears there's a game and people should form teams and they can win prizes, she convinces 4 of her colleagues to join her team. You know, that's sort of what we need. We need enough sort of local opinion leaders to raise their hands, and then we'll get more folks that way, we think. There's some logistics there. It'll be, you know, a 5 to 10 person team. I'm not sure what we're going to decide yet. Raj would have an answer for that, I bet. But it will be, so it might be that CUNA Mutual has 25 teams, or, you know, that are somehow, that we know those are teams for them sort of thing. And it might be that some people choose instead to join a team tied to their kid's school or their neighborhood, or, you know, we'll see. This is, for us, an interesting opportunity to see how much community leverage can happen in that. I think a ton of our recruitment will be at the business level because it's easier to recruit there. We've talked about that before. I think it's way easier to recruit inside companies where people have emails than door-to-door in your neighborhood kind of thing. But this gives us a chance to let some of that other happen, and we'll see what comes of it. It's a vast experiment. Mm-hmm. So great question. Yes, it's Greater Madison area. So it's the City of Madison is what the competition is, but it's impractical and implausible to say, oh, one of your colleagues you want on your team lives in Verona, they can't play. That's dumb. There are only benefits to letting them play too, kind of thing. So it is Greater Madison. So we intend to have follow-up things happen in 2016. Some of that's still in development, how that's going to work, whether that's another community game or some other things building out of what we do with alumni, or, yeah, to be determined. So in a typical game, when we go into a typical company, the company pays us to do employee engagement with their employees. Here, a company can say, hey, employees, join this game. They're still going to get some of the culture benefits of a Cool Choices game, but it's sort of as part of this bigger city initiative. Now, it's not their own custom game. Their employees are playing with employees at other companies. So it's a slightly different thing they're getting here. But in the conversations we've had with folks, there are a number of local institutions who it's a way for them to kind of dip their toe in the water here and try employee engagement at a lower risk level. So we think that, you know, particularly if you think about like the companies who are involved in the Sustainable Business Network or Empower, those are all really good candidates for doing something like this with their employees. We have to figure out how it's more publicly visible. That's one of the challenges as we go into this. And so Ingo's done, for those of you who don't know, Ingo's done a lot of our evaluation work, so he's like thinking about this. And the big question is, when you play at this bigger scale and it isn't a tight social network, you know, how does that change how the game works? How does that change the incidence of cheating? How does that, you know, there's lots of things that keep some of us awake at night about this, but it's also going to be a really good experiment. So there, you know, our emphasis in the game is certainly behavioral things. Typically, we find that the players who at the beginning tell us, I've already done everything I can do, at the end say, wow, there was a bunch of stuff I had no idea I could do. But one of our goals here is also to drive people to retrofits and things that are deeper things if those are sort of what they're ready for in the citywide game. I mean, part of our role on this team is to get people talking about efficiency in a way that increases their participation in focus programs, that gets them, you know, getting rid of old appliances, that gets all of that stuff happening too. So it's a little bit of a combination. But we think people have to get to that place where they're talking about this and they see that efficiency is something my neighbors, my group, whether that's my colleagues or my school friends, value too, and it's something that I should be part of. So there you have it.